is the round one of FIDE Candidates 2024. And Fabiano is playing Hikaru Nakamura and he starts the game with e4. And Hikaru responds with c5. It's a Sicilian on the board. F3 by Fabi and pawn push to d6 by Hikaru. Winners of the FIDE candidates will for the World Championship title. It's Dingleren, and Leren is waiting for the winner here. So after the openings, knight recaptures on d4. So until now, it's the modern variation, the main line of the Sicilian here, and knight c3 and e5 is pushed. So the square on b5 is unprotected. The pawn push should be coming. This allows the bishop to go to b5 with a check, and this is the Venice attack of the Sicilian defense. So you can bring the knight or the bishop, developing one of your pieces by defending this check. Hikaru decides to go with his knight. Fabiano brings his knight to f5, attacking this weak backward as usual in the Sicilian. So once the Sicilian pawn comes, if this pawn is pushed, if later push the pawn on the e file, you will get a weakness here. So pawn push to a6 hits the bishop of Fabi. So if the bishop retrieves by one square, b5 will be coming, forcing the bishop to retrieve again. It's a long game, so Hikaru gets back to the game with his coffee and pushes b5. And bishop retreats to b3. Knight c5 again, attacking this bishop and the pawn at the same time. So both the players are uncastled. So bishop comes to g5, pinning the knight against the queen. And Hikaru goes for the capture of the knight with his bishop, and the position is equal. Pawn recaptures. Bishop e7. Now both the players can castle on the king side of the board. And Fabiano goes for the exchange of his bishop with Hikaru's knight, and forcing the recapture with the bishop of Hikaru. And Hikaru recaptures with his bishop. Fabiano goes for castling now on the king side. Hikaru pushes e4 here, opening up the center. So knight recaptures on e4. The idea is that if black knight recaptures, the rook will come in here, and you can simply grab it back, and if you push the pawn, you can just push the pawn and win the knight back straight. So knight captures in the game. Hikaru goes for the capture. rook e1 is kind of forced here. There's no other move, and rook e1 is coming, and you can either grab this knight. This knight cannot move because of the pin on the black king, and Hikaru uses the opportunity to castle. Rook recaptures the knight by Fabi. And bishop captures the b2 pawn, attacking the rook, and the rook goes to b1. So working out the combination, he brings his bishop to f6. Queen d5, queen comes up the board, forming this battery with the bishop and attacking the pawn which is pinned. Hikaru brings his rook to c8. Queen to b7, here attacking the backward pawn on a6. Hikaru brings his rook to c5, an interesting way to defend by counter-attacking basically. So here this pawn is captured, then you will get the other pawn here. So Fabiano goes for the capture of the pawn. So Hikaru, once he's back, he will capture this pawn on f5. So the exchange of pawns happens. So rook to d1 now, putting in pressure on this isolated pawn. And instead of trying to defend it, Hikaru pushes to d5, reducing so the rook goes to b4, attacking the pawn on b5. Bishop attacks the rook. Fabiano grabs the pawn now. So Hikaru got like 40 minutes on the clock, while Fabiano got 30 minutes. And here, the rook capture f2 pawn. So here, if you capture with the rook with the king, the queen will come in and launch an attack. We will have a perpetual draw here. So, but here the best move was to capture the pawn in the center. And here, Fabiano is slightly better in the position. And regardless, this allows the queen to h4 move by Hikaru, bringing his queen into the attack, giving him some room for counter attack. So queen d3. So the rook retrieves to f6, and pawn push attacks the queen. g3 is pushed. Queen b4, protecting the bishop and moving the queen at the same time. King g2, bringing the king up the board into a safer square. And bishop b2 was played by Hikaru, but pushing the pawn on g6 to g6 was the best. move. So rook to f5, countering that rook here, which was putting pressure on the king of Fabiano. Hikaru pushes g6 and Fabi goes for the capture of the rook. Bishop recaptures. Queen f3, attacking the bishop. Queen goes to e7, supporting the bishop, keeping the position intact. The position is still equal, but Fabiano got this pawns on the queen side of the board, and he pushes one of the pawn to a4, and Hikaru needs to play this correctly to get this into a draw. Now the position is still drawn. He plays king g7, bringing his king into safety under the protection of the black bishop. And because they got these opposite colored bishops, both the players place their kings on the opposite diagonals of their bishop. So a5 now, continue to push the pawn. Rook to a8, challenging that pawn push. Rook d5 and rook a7, connecting both the rook and the queen, and also protecting these pawns on the 7th rank. So once the king moves up to the 7th rank, also 2nd rank, it's always good idea to keep your rooks and the queen on that rank of the weak pawns. So rook b5 now, queen d8, trying to win that pawn. So rook d5 attacks the queen with the support of the bishop and white's queen. Queen c7, pawn push to h4 now. And this pawn is grabbed by Hikaru. The rook recaptures and the rooks are exchanged. We are in an endgame with the queen and the bishops. So opposite colored bishops with the queen. So queen to d8, captures the pawn with the check. King goes to h6. King h3. Queen e7. Not going for that queen trade. Goes to c4. Queen e3. Both the players look at the position and agrees that this is a draw and this is the game. First match